Welcome, folks, to Dicey Banter. We're the TTRPG Talk Show where we speak to all the makers and shakers within the tabletop space while having fun and meaningful conversations while we are at it. Tonight is a very special episode of Dicey Banter because we are deep into season 2 and we've got an amazing guest. But before we speak about our amazing guest, a message of solidarity that I and this channel stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing, and we support all the oppressed peoples around the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free DRC, free Sudan, free Palestine. Additionally, I know this is a very, very difficult time for folks out there. Please know that community is the most important thing that you can have right now. Reach out to folks and queer and trans rights forever. And with that, I'm Valiant Duran. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am your host of Dicey Banter for this evening. And tonight, I have the distinct pleasure, you can see the overlay, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing our amazing guest. He is the founder of the award-winning publisher Mythworks and has published beloved games such as The Wild Sea, Slugbuster, and The Last Caravan. Everyone, please welcome to the Dicey Banter chair, Ray Chou. Ray, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Ray. He, him pronouns as well, and I mean you did a wonderful job at it. So yeah, all of those things. I would like to point out that I am the co-founder, so I do have a wonderful business founder who founded this business with me, and who I love dearly. His name is Vince, and he is sort of the silent bedrock of Mythworks. I get to be the face, but he is definitely the engine that keeps us going.
I love hearing about little partnerships like that. It gives me so much of joy and appreciation to Vince, everyone. Links will also be in chat and under exclamation point guests. And in terms of other commands, today we'll be chatting about all things Mythworks, folks, which is a brand new thing on this channel to be able to speak about the realities of publishing with a publisher. So use exclamation point Mythworks in chat to access their website and learn more about them, and maybe grab yourself a copy of one of their games. And if you are enjoying tonight's episode of Dicey Banter, please consider donating, leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be used to tip myself and our guests. To show our appreciation, please use exclamation point donate in chat to support us. And if you like Dicey Banter and you want to have the episodes a little earlier than everyone else, consider pledging to the Patreon, because you'll be able to get early access episodes to Dicey Banter, as well as works in progress and behind the scenes footage of all the other projects that I'm part of, including games that I design. And with that, there's no better way to begin than by beginning, Ray. So I'm gonna dive right in to your origin story. So I asked this of all my guests. How did you end up within the TTRPG hobby first? Maybe before industry, but how did you get into TTRPGs as a hobby, perhaps?
Sure, there were a couple of key touchstones in my life. One was actually the PC game StarCraft, believe it or not. That was, I think, my first exposure, yeah, to the concept of Dungeons and Dragons. So I played StarCraft when I was, I think, about 9 years old. This must have been, I don't know when it came out, 1998, 1999, thereabouts. And I very quickly, my family was sort of an early adopter to the internet. So I very quickly hopped online to play with other people. And one of my great joys was playing a mode called Use Map Settings in StarCraft. And that's when you can create a custom map for StarCraft and you can customize the triggers and essentially program different types of games and hack the game into different types of things other than base StarCraft. One of the maps that I played a lot of was a Dungeons and Dragons Use Map Settings map, and that introduced me to the whole concept. So in that game, that Use Map Settings game, you have one player who acts as a dungeon master. They spawn enemies that they control, that they then populate this world and put the enemies where the world is, and they type into chat and narrate just like a dungeon master would, and the other players would play a single hero that they would pick and control that one hero and level that hero up and gain different special abilities, and also type in chat and just generally just role play through that. So that was my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons as a concept. I then picked up Baldur's Gate 2 when I think I was in 7th grade, and that was sort of an introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, the actual rule set. And that quickly led to Neverwinter Nights in 2002, and that was a very online game as well. Had online DM tools, online modules, so same kind of idea. As a dungeon master, you could create these entire modules using the game's engine, and you as a player could use a version of the Dungeons and Dragons 3.0 rules. And I remember over the course of the summer of 2001, I think I played a whole campaign with a bunch of other people online almost every day for like 3-4 hours a day. I was hooked on that. And then the actual physical tabletop role-playing game I got into in 2004, I think 2003 or 2004, a couple years after that. And that happened to be because the hobby game store Gamekeeper, which was owned by Wizards of the Coast, it was one of their retail stores at the time, they decided that they no longer wanted to have retail stores. So my local Gamekeeper was going out of business, and because it was going out of business, it sold almost the entire inventory of its games, including Dungeons and Dragons books, for something like 40 to 60% off. So I managed to snag a copy of the 3.5 rules, the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual. I think I got a Faerun, Forgotten Realms setting guide as well. And I got that all for a huge sale. To this day, one of the sales of my lives. And I recruited all my friends to play. And that's how I got into the actual tabletop aspect of the game. And I had got into it knowing the rule set already from playing the video games and understanding the concept of what a Dungeon Master was from playing StarCraft and playing Neverwinter Nights online. So with that basis, I kind of dove into it, created my own campaign over the rest of high school and played with my high school friends, and got into it then. And after high school, when I was in college, I didn't really play much. I think I bought the 4th edition rules, but never got a chance to actually play them. Just kind of fell out of my world for a little bit. I picked up tabletop role-playing games after I graduated in, I think, 2013. When I moved back home, and a lot of my friends were back home as well. And so I started up a Pathfinder 1st edition campaign because I went to my local game store at the time, and the game store owner was like, nobody plays Dungeons and Dragons anymore. Everyone plays Pathfinder. Here, you should play Pathfinder. So he sold me the I think the starter box, and I was able to find the other rules online in PDF form. So, and it's very similar to Dungeons and Dragons. So that's what I did. But around that same time, that's when I was really trying to get my creative career off the ground. So I started off writing screenplays, and then eventually turning those screenplays into comic books. And everything that I wrote, or at least aspired to write, was in the fantasy science fiction genre. And eventually I found some success on crowdfunding. We crowdfunded our first comic book in 2014, Skies of Fire #1. And that was around the same time I was playing Pathfinder. But what I found was that the preparation it took to play Pathfinder, all the DM stuff that you had to do to create the world, the characters, encounters, all that stuff, it took up a lot of time, and it took up a lot of energy. And that same time and energy was the same type of energy that I was using for my creative projects. And I recognized that, and I realized that this wasn't very healthy if I wanted to pursue a creative career. So I very somberly told my players, like, hey, I'm really sorry, but I don't think I can keep playing this because it's just taking up too much time and energy, drawing from the same place that I need for my other aspirations, basically. So put that Pathfinder game aside. But very quickly after that, one of our collaborators for Skies of Fire, our cartographer, Joseph Bandel, was also a cartographer for many, many different role-playing games. And one of the games that he contributed to was this indie game called Blades in the Dark. And the Blades in the Dark just had their Kickstarter, and he showed us this Kickstarter along with the, I think, Quick Start 5 or 6 rules, one of the rule sets. And I being the seasoned Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder player was like, oh, I know role-playing games, yeah, sure. And he showed it to us because he thought it would be a very, very good rule set for our comic, Skies of Fire, which is an airship comic. And so he sent the rules, and I read the rules, and immediately after I read the rules, I just knew that this was a different type of role-playing game than what I had grown up with. And I understood intuitively that this was a paradigm shift. And I wasn't quite sure all of what made it different, but I knew it was different and it was very
Mm.
exciting. And it excited me from a hobbyist standpoint, as someone who played tabletop role playing games, as someone who was burnt out from GMing because of all the prep it took. I recognized that it was a system that encouraged a more improvisational style and had the
Mm-hmm.
mechanics to support the storytelling, which was nothing I had seen before.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was something that I wanted to explore more. So I
Mm.
spent the next couple of years while publishing comics trying to understand the system Blades in the Dark, and this would
Mm.
happen every 3 or 4 months or so. I
Mm-hmm.
would get the urge to understand the game, to try and hack the game and design our own game. I would crack open the rule books and I would read and I would try to run sessions. But the thing is, at the time, there weren't a
Mm.
lot of people playing indie role playing games, at least not in
Yeah.
my circles.
Mm.
And so I tried to find circles in person. So this was circa 2016, 2017, twenty
Mm.
eighteen, those years.
Yeah.
And I live in Los Angeles, so I live in a very large city.
Yeah.
I just couldn't find anybody. I just couldn't find anybody who was publicly playing these games with open tables, who was willing to teach these games. And if
Yeah.
there's one thing about game design, it's almost impossible to design a game without having played it.
Oh
And I
yeah.
was trying to play it, yeah, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't wrap my head around this thing that I was trying to hack. And so I would kind of this would happen for the next couple of years, and I would throw
Mm.
myself against the wall and try to hack it every like 3 or 4 months, and I would
Mm-hmm.
spend a manic 3 or 4 days going online, going to the Google Plus of the Blades in the Dark, looking what other people were doing, trying to
Yeah.
understand the system, writing a little bit, maybe trying to play a session with Vince, who had never played role playing games before.
Mm.
That wasn't something he did, so it was sort of me trying to teach him while trying to understand this new way of playing
Mm.
role playing games. And then inevitably kind of putting it back on the shelf because it was just too difficult
Yeah.
until 2019 rolled around, the end of 2019. And towards the end of that year, we were looking at our calendar, and
Mm.
I told Vince, I was like, "Hey, in 2020, let's make this the year that we really get into role playing. Like, let's make this happen. We've been trying to make this happen for a
Mm.
couple of years now, but I am really gonna throw myself into it, and I'm really gonna understand it." So
Yeah.
towards the end of that year, around November, December, I started taking it really seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and I found a local meetup group in the end of that year, 2019, that I
Mm.
attended a story games group in LA that allowed me to play these type of games. That was really exciting. And then I sort of explored various online spaces to talk
Mm.
about these games, like Discord, like Reddit, and I found myself in these communities and
Mm.
sort of communicating with people and discussing the game and just really spending a lot of my time thinking about the game and taking it more seriously than I had before. And then the pandemic happened, and
Yeah.
the shutdown happened, and that just sort of was a natural catalyst as well,
Yeah.
because then all of a sudden, a lot of people had time to play games, and
Mm.
online was the only place that you could really get any social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the social interaction sort of just increased, and that's eventually how we ended up in the tabletop role playing space. Was because of that year in 2020
Mm.
and deciding to design many different games and play a lot of games and just sort
Mm.
of learn games, especially these indie type of games that we now tend to publish.
That is what a journey. This is also a point of discovery for me to learn that StarCraft may be one of the earliest iterations of a virtual tabletop that I've ever heard in my life. Because that's that's deeply incredible, and we're also continuing the trend here for Dicey Banter guests having their first kind of like proper foray into Dungeons and Dragons of playing the rule set properly in person being 3.5 edition. So that's still the most popular edition of TTRPG intake for Dicey Banner history. That is a very, very kind of like huge history that you've kind of like experienced in entering the publishing world for tabletop role playing games. So let's talk about kind of like the origins of MythWorks then, in the sense of You mentioned before that you used to write screenplays and then you moved into writing comics and such. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, MythWorks began as a comic book publishing front. Like, so how you mentioned having these conversations with your co-founder about the transitioning to tabletop role-playing games. What were those conversations like? What, like, other than the kind of like Blades of the Dark inspiration, seeing a lot of the interconnected elements between the worlds you were building and the games that you like to play, what was that reality like of like, as a comics publisher, thinking we are going to also add tabletop role playing games onto that? What was that conversation like, and that
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, to answer that question, we kind of have to step back into the time machine and go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So I met Vince, my co-founder, in film school. We were film
Mm.
students together. We crewed on many different projects, including a samurai epic that he directed, that I assistant directed, a boxing movie that I produced. What
Mm.
else? An indie sort of shoegaze movie set in a shady motel in Long Island with
Mm.
needles everywhere and mirrors on the roofs. Like we just had so much fun when we were in college making these films. And we went to NYU, which is notorious for this sort of like independent artistic streak in its
Mm.
filmmakers. And many of our classmates were of that mold. They loved to make these type of like deeply soul searching movies
Mm.
that sort of beguiled an independent spirit and really explored, matters of the heart or matters
Mm.
of identity or existentialism. That wasn't me and Vince. Me and Vince were nerds through and through. We were nerds. We bonded over Battlestar Galactica, over Lord of the Rings,
Yes.
over all things nerdy, and that really was the foundation of our friendship. And there weren't many of us in film school. There were a handful, but we definitely were amongst the nerdier ones. And so I always knew that we had this kind of kinship for the types of
Mm.
stories we wanted to tell. We dreamed of being the next George Lucas, right? The next Martin
Mm.
Scorsese. We wanted to make big science fiction fantasy epics rather than mob thrillers
Mm.
or romantic heartbreak movies.
Yeah.
So we always had that in common, and we were always in the same circles together. We always crewed together, so we
Mm.
spent hundreds and hundreds of hours together, hanging out inside of class and outside of class. So we became really good friends in college. And once we graduated, we went our separate ways. But one thing that, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why it is, but we always remained in contact with each other through
Yeah.
Facebook mostly. And when we graduated, I would ask him how he was doing, what he was working on, and he would show me his creative projects in the form of scripts or just ideas
Mm.
that he had, and I would do the same thing. And we would share our works with each other, and we would give each other feedback, and we became
Mm.
kind of like creative buddies in that sense. And we eventually began writing together, first on his script, Skies of Fire, that
Mm.
eventually became the comic book. And right from the beginning, the reason why we got into comic publishing was because we wanted a way to express ourselves, to create our
Mm.
stories, to be able to do it within our means, meaning
Okay.
not get anyone's permission and just be able to do it ourselves.
Mm.
So films are very expensive, especially the type of
Yes.
films that we wanted to make, these big science fiction blockbuster epics.
Mm.
And we knew that we didn't have the cachet, the wherewithal to do that, but we knew that we could maybe do that in a smaller form through comics. And my background kind of came into place at that time,
Mm.
where I was a producer in film school. I produced
Okay.
many projects. And as a producer, you learn to budget, you learn to schedule, and you learn to promote and market a
Mm.
film, basically, and
Yeah.
fundraise for a film. So you learn how to do this thing called a prospectus, a film prospectus, which is
Okay.
essentially kind of like an overview of the film, trying to attract potential investors in the film. And I was really
Mm.
good at that. And I was also, I was generally like pretty well organized and was able to
Mm.
organize other people to do these film projects. So I took that training and I proposed to Vince, hey, why don't we do a comic book instead? And did my homework research.
Mm,
And at first we wanted to submit to, say, like a Dark Horse or an Image, and that was kind of the
mm,
goal. But the more research we did, the more we realized that there was this kind of burgeoning independent creator thing going on in crowdfunding. And
mm.
we knew Kickstarter very early on because we were in film school in New York when Kickstarter was founded in 2008.
Yeah.
And Kickstarter is a Brooklyn-based company. So many of our fellow student filmmakers were early adapters of the program. My account dates back
Mm.
to like 2009. It's like pretty early on the platform, and that was
Yeah.
because we had friends who would fundraise on Kickstarter for their student films. And I think early on that was one of the main things people were fundraising, were like these
Mm,
independent, like New York student films or short films or otherwise.
mm,
So we knew about the platform from day one. And as we got into making a comic book, which is sort of similar to making a film in the sense that you work with multiple people, you have a division of roles and all this
mm.
stuff. I realized that a lot of people were making comics on Kickstarter, and that seemed really cool, and that
Yeah.
seemed like an opportunity. So the more research I did, the more it seemed like that was the opportunity that we should take. And
Mm,
I eventually convinced Vince to do it. And we did it, and we managed to find a audience on crowdfunding, and that was amazing. And that allowed us to keep making comic books and to grow
mm,
our fan base and to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. When we started making comics on Kickstarter, that's when all of the publishing stuff kind of came into play too, because
mm,
now our first plan for Skies of Fire #1, we thought we were going to print like maybe 30 copies of it and print them at like, $15 each or whatever, just
mm.
just just for people who wanted it. But
Yeah.
525 people backed us, and we looked at the numbers, and the amount to print, I think we had about 300 or so orders. So the
Mm,
amount to print 300 comic books on demand on a digital printer was about the same price as it was to print 1,000 overseas.
oh,
So we were like, oh, okay,
wow.
why don't we print 1,000 then? It's like the same price, and we'll
Yeah.
figure out what to do with the remaining issues.
That's wild. That's wild
Yeah,
to think about. That's surprising.
yeah, it's the economies of scale and manufacturing really at play. So we did that, and we also had some money, so we booked a table at New York Comic Con in 2014. That was our first time
Mm,
exhibiting, and that allowed us to get that experience of going to a convention and selling our wares, selling ourselves
mm.
on that. And after we did that, that was the extent of our plans, to be honest. We did
Yeah.
the first Kickstarter, and we were like, okay, great, now we have some issues, we have a bunch of more, and we had enough money, we made enough money where we could do the second issue, key point, where we could
Mm,
produce the second issue. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do after that. Like, oh, are we just going to like that's it? And one of
mm,
our friends, our comic friends, Madeline Holly Rosling, she just kind of looked at me at I think like Long Beach Comic Con, like, or something. She was like, well, why
mm.
don't you just go back on the platform to do the second issue? And
Yeah.
like that had never occurred to me. To be honest, I was like, oh yeah, maybe that makes sense. Let's do that. So we
Mm,
did that, and we found even more success, and we found a way to keep it going, basically, and to do a Kickstarter every
yeah.
time we did an issue. And every time we did an issue, we learned a little bit more. At first we were just printing comic books, which are saddle stitch zines, right? Like,
Mm,
so we learned how to make a zine, and we learned the language of printing a comic book. And every time we would do a campaign, we would try to learn something a little bit more too. So we did like t-shirts our first time out, and then
mm,
postcards, and then like we did a plushie for Glow, the first issue of Glow, because I wanted to
mm,
learn how to manufacture toys, and then that gave us the experience to do that. And I made jewelry, and then I made like we did a paper craft, and we just always like especially early on, we just tried to learn how to make things, basically, and not just like make things on like one-on-one basis, but how to
Mm,
like manufacture things basically and
mm,
get things made. So we have that kind of background going into our role-playing publishing. So to answer to go back to the question of how we got into tabletop role-playing publishing, the
mm.
plan always was to self-publish our own games that
Yeah.
were going to be based off of our comics. So we were going to do a Skies of
Mm.
Fire tabletop role playing game. That was the big plan. And in doing that, we made, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 versions of that game, like
Yeah.
full, 80,000 word, like
Wow.
documents
Yeah.
that we drafts that we did. And we experimented a lot. We made a whole bunch of other games, and in doing that though, like we were trying to figure it out, but this really it was about this opportunity that came in. And I think important to this conversation too is that
Mm.
we had thought about publishing other people's works too, not
Mm.
necessarily role-playing games at the time, but comic books, because
Yeah.
we were reasoning to ourselves like, well, we're learning how to manufacture the thing, we're learning how to sell the thing, and isn't that what a publisher does? Like that's pretty much what a publisher does. So we're already
Yeah.
kind of learning how to like publish something, so like why
Yeah.
don't we just like publish other people's stuff instead of just
Mm.
our stuff? And I think there's like maybe a Kickstarter update from like 20, I don't know, 18 or 2019, where like I actually like posit that question. I'm like, I don't know
Mm.
what's next, maybe we'll get into publishing or something like that, right? So talking about like speaking things into existence or whatever, right, or
Mm.
having plans. So we were in 2020 making a lot of small games, designing the
Mm.
Skies of Fire tabletop role-playing game, and eventually I playtested this game called The Wild Sea, and I found it on a subreddit online called RPG Creation, I think, which was started because the founders of that subreddit disagreed with the other RPG design subreddit, and so they spun off into their own subreddit,
Mm.
and there was like some subreddit drama, and this guy named Felix Isaac started posting on there for playtests, and I
Mm.
noticed it because it was a new subreddit. There were just a couple hundred of people in there, but he managed to get like 50 replies on his
Mm.
open call for playtesting. And having observed a lot of the scene and other people try to get playtesters, that's very uncommon, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
ask for a playtest, and like usually you get crickets, or you get like your a couple of your close homies. and
Yeah.
and so I looked into it, and it was really cool. Like the document was really cool, the
Mm.
rule set was really cool, and I signed up for a playtest, and I did that playtest. I had a really good time, didn't think anything of it. But a couple of days after that playtest, he came back to me on Discord and said, "Oh, hey, you're Ray Chou of Glow. You created the comic Glow." I was
Mm.
like, "Yeah, that's me." And he was like, "Oh, that comic is one of the inspirations behind this RPG."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
that's super interesting." Like that's a lot of happenstance basically, right?
Mm.
So I think at that point I kind of opened up the conversation where I was like, "Okay, well, what are your plans with this RPG? What do you want to do with it?" We talked
Yeah.
a little bit about crowdfunding, we talked about his goals. I think I eventually propositioned like, "Hey, are you looking for a publisher? Maybe this is
Mm.
something we could work on together." And that's how we ended up publishing The Wild Sea and getting into tabletop role playing publishing.
That is incredible. We also, folks who are watching this episode who might have caught the last episode, which was our interview with Felix. But this is a huge like kind of like unveiling of the origin story of the Wild Sea and how you and Felix are connected and all of that. That is uh, it is so interesting to me to hear the kind of like transition between the uh comic book creation and like self-publishing element through Kickstarter at its infancy. It sounds like when it first got started, but learning a lot of the formulas and the strategies for it, which we will talk more on later on about the realities of crowdfunding and things like that, and then transitioning into tabletop role playing and Wild Sea kind of being the big foray into publishing this game. So I wanted to ask next, now that we know kind of like MythWorks' sort of like origin story and hearing about how it came to be, when did you find kind of like MythWorks' identity as a publishing house? At what point was it this these things are who we are, especially since it has been kind of like a long time coming from a self-publishing to comics, now comics and TTRPGs and a bunch of other cool stuff. When did you think that MythWorks solidified as an identity and as a publishing
Oh,
house?
that since the beginning. We knew
Amazing.
what we wanted to do from the beginning. We our original name was Mythopoeia.
Mm,
Mythopoeia comes from a J.R.R. Tolkien poem. It's sort of like a made up word, like a Greek
mm-hmm.
word meaning to myth make, to create worlds. And that was really important to us. Like from the beginning, we didn't want to just create stories. We wanted to create entire worlds. We wanted
Mm,
our comics, our whatever we did, we wanted it to be as deep as possible, to feel like a lived-in world with its own mythology, its own
mm,
histories, its own cultures, its own people. So
mm.
everything that we do is sort of revolved around that kind of like maximalist concept. We really,
Yeah,
really try to leave no stone unturned, basically, in terms of what we do. And I think it kind of shows in the quality of our work,
yeah.
especially even in the beginning, like Skies of Fire is a really gorgeous comic, and we created a lot of back matter material that told the story of the world from the perspective of the world, and we just always try to dug into basically the why this world exists. What are
Mm,
the justifications for airships being the dominant means of
mm,
transport, commerce, and war? What does that look like? Why? What are the geographical factors that would lead to that? What are the political factors that would lead to that? All of this stuff, right? Kind of a
yeah,
reflection of our own world, but not really. And that's really what we loved. We loved that deep world building aspect, even
yeah.
before world building was even really like a term. I feel like it kind of became a term
Hmm.
right as like Mythopia or
Y-
MythWorks. We were doing our thing, so we
Yeah.
were always really about that. Being very intentional, being very and trying as hard as we could, just sort of
Mm,
like being very like um detailed in
mm.
what we were doing. And I think that was a natural fit for RPGs as well.
Yeah.
And that kind of alludes to like the reason why Felix was attracted to Glow. One of the main reasons was because we created our own language for Glow. That's
Mm.
like the cover of Glow back
I
there. So
love
so that
glow.
that yeah, that right there is a Nymerian, which is our own language that we invented for Glow. That is the magical language, and that's sort of like what captivated him the most and inspired him
Mm,
to create a bunch of different languages for the Wild Sea.
mm,
So that aspect of it, like, kind of was seen in the Wild Sea DNA, and I was like, okay,
mm.
like this is somebody who shares that kind of love of world building, and RPGs in general are just like great vessels for world building.
Yeah.
So it seemed like a natural fit to sort of go from one to the other. So very early on, we knew
Mm,
that, like, that identity of you know building these deep immersive worlds that you can get lost in was what
mm.
MythWorks was.
I can see knowing the kind of like IPs that inspired not only you but also Vince, it has made me go, oh yeah, this would be the direction the both of you would go in, and it's so nice to see folks who deeply love worlds continue that kind of like spirit of world building. I am curious about a question that we sort of touched on when we talked about your journey in the TTRPG space of leaving behind the DM seat briefly because creatively you were drawing from similar wells when it came to like creation, world building and such. And now being a tabletop publisher with also comic publishing and also all these kind of like different elements of the work that you do, how has that been for you, that journey of drawing from the same creative well? Has it gotten better? What is your relationship with that kind of like engagement with your creative energies now?
Yeah, I've realized over time that I actually have very limited energy in general. Like, I have to protect my energy. Like, I love I love hanging out with people and socializing, but I get tired very, very easily. So and the role playing game especially can be a very, very tiring thing. After playing like a session of a game, I'm usually feeling very, very exhausted, and it's hard to transition to anything else. I usually just need to decompress from it. And along with that, I found that as my responsibilities have grown as a publisher, as a business owner, the time that I have has certainly shrunk, and it's become very, very important for me to know how to spend my time wisely and how to prioritize certain tasks and to develop a system where the business is growing and we're reaching our goals, and I'm spending my time doing the things that help achieve those goals rather than just getting lost in the endless amounts of work that need to happen at any given time, because it's at any given time I can always be working. I can be working from the moment I wake up to the moment I sleep, and not be done, right? And I think that's the reality of being a business owner. Anybody who is an entrepreneur who has gone out on their own, I think has a similar experience. And then the question becomes like, okay, then what do you spend your time on? and
Yeah.
and that is a very difficult question to answer, and it is one that I think about often. But
Mm.
I will tell you, recently, as of 2025, one thing that I have adopted for this new year is I will spend my first working hour um, only on creative work, and that is my
Hmm.
new rule. So I will wake up, I will walk my dog, I will wash my face and brush my teeth and meditate and do my Duolingo, and then when I step
Mm-hmm.
into my desk, or I like to go to a coffee shop for the first half
Mm.
of the day. When I go to work, the first thing I will do is I have a little panda timer. I'll set it for like the full hour, and then I'll only work on a script or creative work, or just solely creative stuff, basically. And I do that because I find that even though I have limited energy,
Mm.
if I have the best part of my energy, the when I'm the freshest and my mind is the clearest, I can get a
Mm.
lot done basically in a very short amount of time. But I don't want to squander that. And in the past, I would say, okay, today I'm gonna write. Today I'm gonna spend the day writing. But I have all these things. I have all these people that need responding to. Let me just answer a couple of emails. Let me talk to so
Yeah.
and so and so and so. And then by the time I've been doing that for like 2 or 3 hours, even if it's not the longest amount of time, I just will be mentally drained, or I'll just feel heavy, and
Yeah.
it'll be hard to get into
Emails will
creative
drain
work.
any man.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and creative work is the most difficult work there is. Like,
Yeah.
period. It's
Yeah.
it's it, it requires the most mental energy and fortitude, and it is. There's so much going on in your brain when you're, especially when you're writing stories and you're trying to
Yeah.
break stories. There's just so much to consider. So I found that, like, oftentimes, um, even if I do have like a 3 or 4 hour chunk to write, the
Mm.
first hour, maybe the first 2 hours will be really, really strong, and then I'll be waning, and my attention will sort of go lower and lower, and I'll be less and less productive, right? So that's something I think about too, is like, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily for me like how much time I'm working on something. It's like the quality of time, and how clear I'm able to think and work through
Mm.
these things. So that's sort of the way that I've been trying to balance my time, especially my creative work in 2025, is
Mm.
spending that first hour solely on creative things. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen. Like on Monday, we had a big financial meeting with me, Vince, and our CFO, and we
Yeah.
needed to go over quarter four, 2024. We need to go over the numbers, and we need to go
Yeah.
dig into the spreadsheets, and that's like the exact opposite of creative work, right? But it's
Yeah.
like, it's very important for me as the CEO to be there to like look at
Mm.
the numbers, even if I'm not good at the numbers, because I need to see what's going on with the company, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, I'm looking at these numbers, and it's a whole day endeavor. We started at like We started at 9, and basically we went till about 3 o'clock, and then we said, okay, we're not quite done, but we need to pick this up at another day. And that's like all time on one call together, right? Just looking at spreadsheets, looking at invoices and stuff. And for that day, I wasn't able to write because that was more important. But I try to, if I can, like spend that first hour only writing, and so far it's been really good. I feel really good about this new habit, and I think it just sets me up where once I'm done writing that hour, I still feel okay, right? I don't feel like so drained from writing that I don't want to do anything else, and then I can go into my emails, I can take meetings, I can do whatever else, and then hopefully go about my day.
That makes a ton of sense, and I think especially in our particular industry where it is unfortunately the state of being that from the highest level that you could be in the industry to the lowest level you could be in the industry, you are likely wearing like a dozen hats at once, and there's so many demands on your time. To be able to carve that creative time for yourself, I think it's a thing and a value that is applicable and appreciated. I think we can all appreciate that sort of like need that we might all have, and it's really nice to hear from a publisher that you have that those kind of like thoughts and you're carving that time for yourself. But that is a great segue to a question I did want to ask, especially for folks who want to kind of like understand what a publisher does. What does a day in your life look like as the CEO of a publishing house? We got a little bit of a taste with your first hour of the day, but what does your day to day look like?
Right. So I guess going over today, I started off the day, woke up. Usually I have some morning things I like to do. So I find it really. I've been reading this book, Atomic
Mm.
Habits, recently,
Okay,
and
yeah.
basically Atomic Habits are like a small win set you up for big wins, and
Mm.
having small things in the day, like making your bed, like going out for a walk in the morning, or whatnot, like they help build compound interest in your life over time, right? And like I used to be really like skeptical of self-help books, especially, but as I've gotten older, I kind of like realize the value of that stuff, or like I find
Mm.
myself asking in my 30s. I'm 36 now. In my 30s, basically, like, okay, how do I make the most use of my time,
Yeah.
or like how am I most productive? How do I work the best, basically? Because I have so many goals and dreams that I still want to accomplish, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm just trying my best still to achieve those things. So I always like waking up early. I wake up around like 6:45 ish. I walk my dog for about 45 minutes. I meditate for about half an hour. I do my Duolingo. I
Hmm.
brush my teeth. I wash my face, and then I do my first hour of creative work. After
Hmm.
that, I'll usually go into my emails. So I'll try to empty out my email box, address anything that is in there, and respond to people. Once I do that, I try to check in with my team. So I'll talk to Rick, who is our chief people person and handles a lot of our customer support stuff,
Mm.
and talk to him about what's going on. And then I will oftentimes then go from that. Like today, I went to the office. I dealt with customer support stuff. So
Mm.
I shipped a bunch of packages that need to go out, and I'm trying actually my best to move away from that.
Mm.
I'm trying to the difficulty, I guess what I'll say is the difficulty I'm facing right now is trying to design systems and processes so I don't have to do everything, and that Vince doesn't have to do everything. And how can we reliably design a system where um, what is needed to be done gets done, and I with me just checking in every once in a while, so I'm not micromanaging. That's kind of like where my head is at with stuff, and how to trust people with tasks, because we really grew a lot last year. I mean, we had a really big year. As you know, we had like a couple of really big reviews that blew up our business, and we went from from basically like a 2-person company to now we're like a 3 or 4 person company basically, and we're trying to grow more. And it's a delicate balancing act, and it's figuring out, okay, what can people do, how do we design these roles, and how do we make sure the things that are in this role are getting done. And I haven't figured it all out myself yet. And what I'm trying to keep in mind though is that, like, in order for us to grow, I need to be doing the things that I'm best at.
Mm.
And like for me, it's like, okay, what are the things I'm best at? I think I'm really good with working with people, with talking
Mm.
to them about their projects, and helping those projects along and developing those. I think I'm really good at like the marketing end, or communicating what's going on with the company. And I think I'm really good at like thinking about what our company needs, and what the next
Yeah.
step is, and to make moves to ensure that we get to do those next steps, and to research what that is, to talk to people who we might need to talk to, slash
Mm.
who might be able to help us in growing the company. And then Vince's role, what Vince does is sort of like, so I'm sort of like future facing, and I'm looking like, okay, where are we going and how do we get
Mm.
there? And Vince oftentimes looks at, okay, what do we have now, and how do we make sure the machine keeps running? So it's
Got
like
you.
we're building this machine, and there's like these various parts that need to be tinkered with to maintain, and how do we do that? So the things that I am still doing, but I'm trying to do less of, are like customer support, right?
Yeah.
So trying to design processes where people are able to just do that, but sometimes it's faster and cheaper if I just ship stuff out from our office. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it goes. um, I'm trying to, we're trying to improve our shipping, our logistics
Mm.
stuff. So trying to find better partners, and more responsive partners, so that we can deliver like the best possible
Mm.
service to our backers, and our customers. And that's a huge work in progress, and it's a
Yeah.
huge point of weakness for our company right now. And so, we're trying to shore that up. So I'm talking to other logistics companies. I'm talking to people who are coming from the outside, and talking to them
Mm.
about my problems, and they're like, well, have you thought about this or that, and trying to like brainstorm and figure out what that looks like.
Mm.
And then I am oftentimes talking to manufacturers. So I'm talking to manufacturers directly, giving them the print ready files, and making sure that they have everything that they need. Or if they're communicating with another manufacturer who's making another part, so that they know that's going to get dropped off to so and so, and then that's going to get on a boat, and all
Mm.
that logistic stuff. And that's stuff that I also hope that eventually I'll be able to hand off, or I'll be able to give to somebody, because it's like my thing too is that I'm a very quick learner.
Yeah.
I understand things very quickly, but I very rarely have like great mastery over things. I'm not
Mm.
always like the best at things, but I can learn things really fast. and
Mm.
and because I can learn things really fast, I can understand like what goes into that thing. So like,
Yeah.
I can understand what goes into printing, manufacturing. I understand like, okay, we need this from a 3PL, or we need this from like a platform like Shopify will be better, or like learn Photoshop really quickly, or layout stuff, and blah
Yeah.
blah blah, all this stuff. But I'm not never going to be like the best at those things. So my goal now is to like, try to find people who are like the best at those things, and let them kind of succeed in what they're doing, and
Mm.
so I can kind of be where I'm the best at, which is really just like, I don't know, I don't even know, like, I guess just like thinking of stuff, or visualizing where we want to be, like. And I don't even know sometimes, but that's kind of it. So
Mm.
my day-to-day is like kind of all over the place. It can
Mm.
involve like talking to creators. It can involve talking to manufacturers, talking to supporters directly, talking to other companies. I'm arranging a lot of stuff for Gamma right now, so I'm
Mm.
booking a lot of meetings. I'm also involved with the Gamma Horizons Fellowship, which is
Yeah.
the DEI initiative for the board game, the Game Manufacturing Association.
Mm.
So every week we do like a panel, basically not every week, every month we do 2 panels, one for retailers and publishers. So
Mm.
a lot of times I'm reaching out to people to speak on the panels, communicating
Mm.
with them. So I'm like bouncing left and right, back and forth all the time between like these various
Yeah.
things.
No,
But
absolutely.
like,
I'm hearing this. I'm like, Ray, you're doing so much. And I think that's especially illuminating, I think, because, I think folks have, and I'm guilty of this as well. I think folks have this idea of when we think about publishing, we think about we think about like several moving parts, several cogs, a huge machine that's working, lots of people, right, that are moving things along. But there are publishers out there that you've just mentioned that your company has grown to like a 4-person team, and you're still doing customer facing things with like customer support and dealing with a lot of these like different elements that you've had to learn on the fly. And I think it's very illuminating, I think, for folks out there about like understanding, especially how TTRPG publishing looks like, especially
yeah.
within the indie scene. Are there any other sort of kind of challenges or maybe elements of being a publisher that you don't think are understood nor kind of like fully appreciated of the kind of like greater complexity by the public or by the community as a whole?
Yeah, it's more creative than you think. I guess is what I would like to sort of like get across. It's like the like I think that it's important to have a vision for what
Mm,
you want things to be,
yeah.
and there has to be somebody who is guiding that vision, and being
Mm,
like, this is what we are aspiring to do,
mm,
and to be sort of like a north star for the project, for the company as a whole. And oftentimes the publisher is the person to do that. I think of Maz from Rowan Rook and Deckard, which is
mm,
like, so like, Grant Howlett and Chris Taylor are kind of the faces of the company, and definitely Grant is the
mm,
face of the company. But Maz is the third founder, and Maz is like the secret partner, right? The
mm,
secret founder, and
yeah.
they're actually like the powerhouse. They're the ones who
Mm,
are actually like, making things work or whatever. And then that's
mm,
it's a thankless job, is because the designers, the artists, they get all the credit, right? And it's
yeah.
like you're just sort of the person who most people assume that the publisher is just the one that prints the books and writes the checks. And that's
Yeah.
like true to a certain extent. That is
Mm,
definitely true, but there's just so much more than that a publisher does. It's
mm,
there's a lot of good publishers anyway. It's like, you're curating a line, right? You're thinking about
yeah.
what fits in with things. You're hopefully you have like strong enough taste or design sensibilities where you can have good input into there, and just sort of like, guide projects along, and figure out where they fit, connect the right people so that they can collaborate together. It's like a
Mm,
lot of stuff like that, basically. I also wanted to kind of circle back to your previous question a little
yeah.
bit. Like, um, I think that when you are a publisher or any other type of business owner or
Mm,
entrepreneur, there is a stage where you wear lots of hats,
yeah.
especially when you're just starting out, right? When you're starting out, you have to wear all of the hats,
Yeah.
because who else is going to do it? You have to, and it's good to wear all of the hats because you want to know what it takes, in
Yeah.
terms of like what are all of the various moving parts that happen in this business that I
Mm,
want to make. So it's important to understand all of those things, but there will come a certain point, or at least it did for me and Vince,
mm,
where you realize that like, my time is better spent doing other things. And I think
mm,
right where we're at right now is like we're in the early to still middle stages of that,
mm,
basically. So the best money I spent last year was bringing on a CFO, or a bookkeeper, basically. I say
mm,
CFO, but really she's my bookkeeper. She manages our P&Ls. She
yeah.
manages our accounts. She records everything, she documents everything in the right category and
Mm.
all of that stuff. Keeps our financials clean,
Yeah.
basically. And before I was doing that, and guess what? I failed like 4 math classes in high school. Like I am very bad at that stuff, and we were not keeping the best records, right? Like we were not great. I was not keeping the best records. I was not great at that. That's not my zone of genius,
Mm.
as it were. Numbers
Yeah.
for a long time scared me, right? Like I would get anxiety opening up that stuff and looking at bank accounts. But Eileen, she's great with numbers, right? She's
Yeah.
not scared of them. She's super objective about it, and she doesn't mind doing that, and she is organized and can keep all that stuff. So like bringing her on board, and now this thing that I was dreading to do every like 2 to 3 months, knowing
Mm.
that it's just taken care of and that I can have someone like do that reliably and
Mm.
just report into me and be like, hey, this is what it looks like, you watch out for this and this and this. It's like such a burden off my back,
Yeah.
right? And like similarly with the customer support stuff, it's like now that we have someone full time who is handling that, it's like, okay, it's not perfect right now, but it's getting way better in terms of
Mm.
like, okay, now I don't have to spend the time doing that, because it's like, okay, it's not it doesn't take up the most brain power when you're doing that work, but oftentimes it can take like 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
Like it just answering emails, and then after you're done, it's like that's tiring, and it's like, okay, well, that's now time where I can spend thinking about other things, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about how to grow this company, and so on and so forth. So like we're kind of in that stage where like
Mm.
things are transitioning and we are becoming more of a legitimate company.
Mm.
It's still scary. It still doesn't feel like we're quite there yet.
I
And
can
I also
imagine.
know that like every growth, like let's say that like, we triple or 10x in size in the next
Mm.
3 years, right? I know that that company is going to look a lot different than this company it is right now, and
Yeah.
every like size that you have, whether it's like one person, 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, you have to find different ways of operating, right?
Yeah.
Like there's different like, and that's sort of like what I'm learning and trying to figure out, and like trying to understand how to like lead bigger
Yeah.
teams, and like hopefully grow this company in that direction.
Thank you so much. That is like eye-opening, and understanding kind of like the reality within the publishing house, understanding the kind of like true nuances of being a publisher is deeply wonderful. So thank you for sharing that with me. And with that, folks, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to speak about community building as a publisher, working with influences, and measuring success, as well as a teaser we spoke about earlier about the realities of crowdfunding. All of that when we come back. Please get up, stretch, pet your pets, tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And we will be right back after this lovely ad break. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye. Hello, folks, and welcome back from that wonderful break. I hope you got up, stretched, and pet your pets and told them Mr. Valandorian loves them very, very much. We're back on Dicey Banter with our incredible guest, Ray Chou, and we're here to talk more about the realities of publishing and being a publisher. But in this half, we're going to be talking about community building, working with influencers, measuring success, and crowdfunding, which we got a little teaser of in the first part. A reminder for folks, you want to go check out everything that Ray has to offer, as well as Mythworks. Use exclamation point guests and exclamation point Mythworks in chat to get access to all those links, and maybe snag a copy of a Mythworks game for yourself as a treat, or even a comic book. I'm not the boss of you. Go ahead and do that. And with that, folks, let us jump right back in with our interview. So, Ray, we kind of spoken a lot about the origin stories of your publishing, the many hats that you have had to like wear throughout the years in your experience. And one of the things that seems key in publishing, and what was apparent in your experiences, especially with engaging with different circles, was community building. And I wanted to ask you to kind of like expound upon that a bit more, of like, what does community building look like as a publisher versus as an individual creator? Like, what were the things you had to learn about building that community for Mythworks?
Well, I think to be honest, I think they're very similar, or they
Mm,
start from the same place. I think that when we first started getting into tabletop role playing
mm,
games, we weren't publishers yet. We were just aspiring designers and creators like everyone else,
mm-hmm,
and just really passionate about this hobby of ours. And what I did was I engaged in various spaces online during that pandemic year and built
mm,
community with a lot of wonderful folk,
mm,
a lot of whom I'm still in touch today. Specifically, I was very involved in the Blades in the Dark hacking community over on
mm,
Discord. Met a lot of wonderful designers there. Actually, Emmanuel Mello, the designer of CBRPNK, I met through
mm,
that. I met Mikey Ham, the designer of Slug Blaster, through that same community. So a lot of a lot of us were in the same boat and
mm,
making these games and just talking about these games and being passionate about it.
mm.
Playtesting other people's games. I mentioned that I playtested Felix's games. I also playtested a whole bunch of other people's games too. I just wanted to have as much experience as I could possibly have. So I played a lot of games. I played
Mm,
games that I played lots and lots of playtesting games, not just online too, or well, online during the pandemic, but in addition to my online communities, I also became involved in Story Games LA, which
mm,
local story games community, and I was able to meet a lot of wonderful people there and also play games. And part of my journey as a publisher of our
mm,
TTRPGs was having to relearn how to play these games, having to relearn how to GM these games, which is very very different from GMing, say, like Dungeons and Dragons. So I had to teach myself how to do it, or gain the confidence, I think is a
yeah.
better way of putting it, to actually GM. And I wouldn't have been able to do that unless I had a group like Story Games LA that was welcome and
Mm,
open and fun and just inclusive and able to
yeah.
provide the environment where you can try things out, right? And they're
Yeah.
encouraging. They won't let you fail because we're all just here to have a good time, right? The
Yeah.
stakes are low. So those two communities were really, I think, the core of my RPG community,
Mm,
and I learned so much through them. I learned how to design an RPG. I learned
mm,
how to run an RPG. I learned how to interact and engage in community, and so many of those people I still interact with today, and a lot of them I'm actually publishing. So if that gives you kind of indication as to, like, if you want to do this, like, okay, how do you find stuff that's quality to publish? And the answer is you
mm,
go out there and you seek it, right? And I
yeah.
think there's this thing where you have a cohort of people, and because you all have similar experiences, when one of you succeeds, it's like all of you succeeds, and you're able to,
Mm,
like, bring each other up, so to
yeah.
speak. So that was really really important. Later on, when we were first publishing the Wild Sea, when we were first making it, I got on
Yeah.
TikTok, and
Yes.
that was really really fun. So I'm not sure if on aggregate TikTok has been a good thing in my life, to be honest, because I waste a lot of time on that platform, and
The
I feel like
pros and cons, the
oh my
constant
gosh,
balance.
it's such. I mean, I definitely, like, I don't know about you, Valiant, but I struggle with brain rot. I really do.
Oh
I
yeah.
really do find myself just, like, doom scrolling. Like, I have this habit, and I'm saying it now, like, here on stream, so hopefully I can, like, cut this habit. But when I'm driving and I get back
Accountability.
home, yeah, I'll like pull up into the driveway, and then I'll, like, not pull in all the way and park my car, and I'll be like, all right, I'm in the driveway, and I'll bust out my phone, and I'll just start doom scrolling
No.
for like 10, 15
Really?
minutes. And I'll be like, why am I doing this? Why? And I'm just like, give me that dopamine, baby. I want it. I
Oh
want
my
it so bad.
god, no.
But regardless, there are really good things about TikTok. And when I first started TikTok, I thought, okay, this is going to be a great way to advertise
Mm,
what MythWorks does. So that's the mindset I had going into it. Was like, okay, I'm going to try and use this as an advertising platform.
yeah.
And instead, what I found was a wonderful community of passionate RPG enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And I found it that instead of using it as a way to advertise, and I think there are people who do that really well,
Yeah.
and who are able to showcase their products, and are able to make it about their products and what
Mm,
they're doing really well. Instead, I found myself engaging in conversations about role playing games,
yeah.
about design, about games I liked, and all that stuff. So like, the people that I connected with a lot of them were bigger influencers
Mm.
with bigger followings and whatnot. But I engage them on that level of like, hey, like this is something I love, and this is something that you love. And because I engaged with them on that level, like we became friends and doing stuff like charity streams for Gaza, for Palestine. That led to a lot of really cool relationships as well. So it's like that kind of stuff, right? It's like I think when it comes to community, the key is number one, to be open-minded, right? To go into it and to be willing to meet people where they
Mm.
are, and number two, to not go into it with any sort of like set agenda of like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what I can get out of it, right? And it's like,
Mm.
if you're able to do those two things and just kind of meet people where they are and to genuinely like engage in people, especially when you have a commonality like role playing games, this really niche hobby of ours, right?
Mm.
It's so easy to talk about the things you both collectively love, and
Yeah.
to to start a friendship, start a relationship, and because
Yes.
of that, that's led to a lot of the other opportunities or stuff like that, right? So
Mm.
it's never about like just what can I get out of it, I guess, when it comes to
Mm.
community. I think charity and community work is so important. That's why I'm involved. I'm chairing or co-chairing the Horizons Fellowship, because it's just like such a great program, right? And
Yeah.
doing volunteer work, even though there is no like monetary gain, like
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're doing in your free time to forward community for the causes you believe, like I
Mm.
promise you, like you will be rewarded for it, right? You will
Yeah.
be paid, not in money necessarily, but there will be things that happen because of the goodwill, the karma that you're putting out there, that just will help you along the way, whatever it is that you're doing. But it's like the key is like you have to be pure intention by it. And I try to go by like the rules that I try to like follow. And
Mm.
sometimes I'm not good at it, sometimes I mess up, sometimes
Yeah.
like I think I'm not doing certain things enough, but I always try to keep in mind like, okay, uh love myself, right? I try not to like disparage myself and
Mm.
like and call myself like bad or whatever. I try to love myself as much as possible, even when I'm
Mhm.
feeling down, right? And I try
Yeah.
to stop if I am having negative thoughts about myself, about where I am in life or whatever, and I find myself like calling myself names or whatever. I try to like stop and like kind of observe that and be like, okay, like
Yeah.
don't do that, or like why am I doing this, like don't, like be kind to myself, love others, right?
Yeah.
Love others fully, and because we're all one at the end of the day. We're all part of this world, this universe of ours, and give more than you take.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important when you're engaging in community, especially. It's like, okay, like what am I giving to this community? What am I giving back? What
Yeah.
how can I help others, right? And I
Yeah.
think like if you go into it with that mindset, good things will happen
Mm.
regardless. Good things will happen, that are aligned with your goals. Just
Yeah.
just don't put your goals first, right?
Yes.
Put the fact that you're building community, that you're just trying to like make friends, build relationships, and just like
Mm.
like do things together. That's really the most important part. So yeah, early on, Story Games LA, like I would GM for our local conventions at Games on Demand.
Mm.
I host events for them. I like the Blades in the Dark. We did a podcast. I would occasionally host. I would help them organize every once in a while, right? I would just like contribute where I could, right?
Mm.
I hosted we had a fanzine that we put together, and I hosted. I contributed like a couple pieces to that. I hosted it on my itch, and we donated it
Mm.
to charity, whatever proceeds that came in, stuff like that. And like I think about that stuff a lot, because I was like I don't know about our audience, the rest of you, but I often think like, oh, maybe I was at my happiest during the pandemic. Like I feel like that
Oh.
I was like, like I was
Mm.
so zen about things, and part of like that happiness, I think, was because I was doing all of these things and like building
Mm.
community with so many people. So um yeah, it's like when you do that, I think the rest of the stuff will
Mm,
follow. I'm a big believer in intention,
yeah.
about like writing down your goals and manifesting and all that, like all that stuff, right? I'm like
Yeah.
I believe in it. I believe it's important to set goals for yourself. And it's funny because like Felix always like jokes or whatever. He's like, Ray, you're such an American. You're so optimistic. You're always just like, you're always so like, because he's so British and like, so
Oh
kind
yeah.
of like a downer sometimes, right? Or like mild manner, like, oh yes, I guess I made a cool thing. And I'll be like, no, Felix, we're making the best game ever. You're making the
Right.
best game ever. You're gonna win in any. You have all these accolades coming to you, and I'm telling you, they're coming. They're gonna come quick and fast. You're gonna come to our first Gen Con. You're gonna be treated like a rock star. Like I said, all these things, right? They're like, and like I believed it, right?
Yeah.
I like truly believed it, and to a certain extent, they kind of came true, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like you put that intention out there and you work towards that intention in what you do.
Mm,
And it like what I think about oftentimes is that, like, especially nowadays, like I know I'm not like I'm still in a really small niche industry, right? Like
mm,
RPGs are so niche. But even so, it's like I've had some success in this career of mine. And the more success I have, the less time I have. And I think to myself, and I'm like, this must be the case for everyone, right? For like
yeah,
people who are 10 times monetarily more successful than I am, 1 million times monetarily successful than I am.
mm,
And what is it that's important then?
mm.
What is it that, like, how do you determine what's important to do when you have just endless things you could be doing,
Doing,
right? And it's
yeah.
right, and it's all in service of whatever it is you are doing, your goal,
Mm,
your career, whatever, right? So it's like, how do you what do you do, right? Like
yeah.
what's the point, what's the point of it all? Like what's the point of like there's just so much, like what is even the point, right? Like I
Mm,
do think about that sometimes. And my conclusion is that, like, it's all about like the intention and the energy
mm,
you put into it, right? It's like, okay, if I go on stream, and I play this actual play that only gets like 10 people watching over the course of the 4 hours that we're playing, is that a
mm,
good use of my time? And I can
mm,
be like pretty materialistic and be like, no, that's probably not a good use of my time, right? Like, is this
mm.
bringing in sales or whatever? It's like, no, that's probably not bringing any sales, maybe like one sale, right? From those 10 people.
Yeah.
But that's being like really cynical, right? And like
Yeah.
I view it as like, okay, but I'm putting that energy out there, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm building community with these four people. These four
Mm,
people are enthusiastic about playing, and we are engaging in this magic circle, this ritual, right? And like embodying these characters and
yeah.
having fun. And especially when it's like, okay, like I remember I did an actual play of the Wild Sea
Mm,
after we went to our first Gen Con. So the book was out, and I was trying to get like the word out about the game, right? And like,
mm.
we hadn't done the transplayer stream,
Yeah.
we hadn't done a lot of anything. We were out there, but not really, right? We were still kind of like, it's
Mm,
like we were very unknown. And I did an actual play for like 5-6 sessions, and like exactly that. We got like 4 viewers, right? Every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific time.
mm.
And the 4 viewers were probably us, but I think there was so much value and good that came out of it, because like the people I played with were wonderful. We made a wonderful story together. We had lots of laughs, had lots of
Yeah.
fun. But it was that idea almost of like, I'm keeping this alive, right? Like
Yeah.
I am like, like nobody's playing this game on Twitch right now. Like nobody's talking about this game out there. Is like, I gotta talk about it, right? I have to like
Mm,
hold this torch up, because that's what I believe. Like, and I believe in this game, so I am spending my time putting my
mm.
belief into practice in this actual play, right?
Yes.
Like, and that's the type of stuff I think about a lot. And I'm like, if you really think about it, if you really think about just how many things you could do in a day, right? And
Yeah.
how productive you actually can be, and especially knowing that the more successful you have, the more responsibilities you have, the more
Mhm.
stuff you could be doing. It's like, what is it that we are? What do we do? What are we doing? Like, how do we prioritize, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the stuff I think about a lot. my conclusion is always just it's about your intention. It's about like
Mm,
your mindset, right? Because like your mindset, your beliefs and your beliefs in what you're doing,
mm,
um sort of like that's how you get to where you want to go, I guess. Or that's how things actually kind of come forth into
yeah.
reality. And that's my personal belief. I know it's a little bit like, I'm a little bit on that end of things, but
I don't think it's necessarily like a thing to be like concerned about, because I think a lot of the points that you are making are like deeply resonant of what I would consider to be, and I will even go as far as to say what like ourselves as a TTRPG community consider to be some of the greatest parts of the community is when we are engaging with one another in a true spirit of creativity and collaboration. I mean, TTRPGs, collaborative role playing games, right? That's what the praxis and the soul of our hobby is at the end of the day. And a lot of these amazing moments and amazing points of connection happen when we actually get to engage in that way with one another. So I think you're making like a really really good point of like, what you mentioned earlier about um rising tides like raise all ships, right? Being able to help one person. What does productivity look like to you, and like what is truly important at the end of the day? Is it just being able to advance like dryly concretely your own goals, or is it like engaging in something to like a wider degree? Because I can imagine that all these connections that you made with like Storytelling LA, with all these different playtesting groups, have like, I mean, hearing your stories about who these people were and how they've kind of like manifested in your life later on, it feels like to me that the quote unquote value is there in the in the connections that you've made, and the fact that you're able to cultivate these really really beautiful relationships that meant that you all get to cultivate more things later on that are good, whether it's charity streams, cool games, or being able to just have friends and peers to count on for things in the future. I think that's beautiful. Which I think leads me to kind of ask, like, this is Mythworks has been on quite a journey, especially with like community building and building identity and figuring out and growing as a company. When it comes to community building and like establishing that base, with were there like big challenges that were foreseen or unforeseen that came up to you when it comes to engaging with community, or was it something that came naturally through a lot of the engagement you were having with the community from the get-go?
mm, it, I would say it came relatively naturally, but I
Mm.
also it took me a while to learn this stuff, and my
Mm.
own personal journey with community. Like it took me like the first, let's say the first like 8 years of my career to really learn this stuff. And
Yeah.
I guess I'll tell a story of Bill Amata. So there's this gentleman called Bill Amata. He's one of my mentors. He
Mm.
backed our first Kickstarter for Skies of Fire back in the day, and he gave us half a rack. And at that time, we were like, "Whoa, who is this guy, Bill Amata? He just gave us half a rack." Um, and on Kickstarter, he had his profile, and he was the chairman of this company called IW Group, which is
Mm.
an advertising firm out here in
Mm.
Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and New York. They're fairly large. It's a fairly large company. It's probably got 100 employees or something like that.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, this is like the chairman. This is the founder of like a big time advertising firm. This guy's like a
Mm.
big deal, and like
Yeah.
he just randomly gave me like lots of money and like for my comic. Like that's kind of crazy. So I wrote him on Kickstarter. I wrote a very nice thank you letter
Mhm.
to him, as one does. And he responded right away and was like, "Sure, no problem. Hey, what are you doing this week, or what are you doing like 2 weekends from now? Do you want to come to San Francisco, come speak at a convention on a
Oh my
panel?"
goodness.
Yeah, at like at a AAPI, like an Asian American panel. And I didn't know what to do, so I I asked my then girlfriend at the time, and then
Mhm.
and she was like, well, yeah, you should go. Why wouldn't you go? And I asked my my mom, and she was like, yeah, you should just go. Why not? And so I went, and it was 20, 25, 26. I was considerably less comfortable in group environments at the time, and I went, and
Mm.
Bill was very generous, and he was like, oh, hey, Ray, so nice to meet you. Hey, have you met so and so? This person works at YouTube. Hey, so and so,
Mm.
Melissa and Lavanya, these two sisters, they were on Kickstarter too. They're doing this, and just like grabbing me and introducing me to people, right? And me,
Yeah.
like, I'm on like social anxiety, not that comfortable in crowds and whatnot,
Mm.
and like he was just trying to introduce me to people, and he like, I learned later, much later, years later, when I asked him about his story, he told me this story about how he was kind of pulled in as a young advertising, a madman basically, and
Mhm.
how he was pulled into to do a campaign for Anheuser-Busch, the beer company here in the United
Mm.
States, and specifically he was pulled in to do like an Asian American ad campaign in the late 80s, and he
Ah.
felt some kind of way because he was like, me, like they clearly just told me to do it because I'm the only Asian American working at this company right now, so
Mm.
of course they're giving me that assignment. He did it. The guy over at Anheuser-Busch was Latin American
Mhm.
and was a hard ass by his account, and basically asked him all these difficult questions, but in the end gave him the account, was like, congratulations, you won this campaign. He was so ecstatic, he went back to his bosses, and his bosses were like, oh, well, you're gonna have to tell him no because we already have like a contract with Heineken, and that would be a competing client. And he was so mad because he was like, why did you send me to do this whole dog and pony show when you already knew that?
Mm.
We never thought you would actually get it, right? So
Mm.
he goes back and he calls the guy, and the guy's like, well, why don't you just do it? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, why don't you just start a company and I'll be your first client? And he was like, no, I don't, why? Like, that's crazy. But eventually he convinced him to do that. And that guy, by all accounts, was a hard ass, and was very, very mean to him. And Bill was like, well, why? Like, during his retirement, he went to his retirement party, and Bill just, like, he called him out, and he was like, hey, why were you so
Mm.
mean to me, right? Why are you such a hard ass? And then he looked around, he's like, Bill, how many people do you see like at this party that look like me, right? I was like, I was the only Latin American here in this industry,
Mm.
and I had to be this way in order to survive, basically. And I knew that you were the only one that looks like you in your industry, and I had to toughen you up, basically,
Mm.
to survive in this industry in this time period. And like, you have to make sure, basically, to make sure, like, now things are better, but you pass it along, basically,
Mm.
pass it along, and, like, like, just that's what we have to do. And he told me this story, and Bill did, and it's like, one of these core memories of him, right? And like,
Mm.
why he then turned to my generation, and he
Mm.
would find all these little Kickstarter projects, and he would back all these Kickstarters, and then he would just like get us together and make us hang out with each other and
That's
form a cohort,
amazing.
basically. And that group, it's called Ace Next Gen. It's like an Asian American entrepreneur group. Like, through that group is sort of
Mm.
like where I learned the value of community, and not just that, but how to like connect with people, right? How to
Yeah.
like network, quote unquote, and like, function in groups and stuff like that. Because I was just like an awkward nerd, I was just like a socially anxious, like I still am, like I
Mm.
still am not like great, and I think I'm an introvert, and I actually like talked to Bill about it, because I was like, Bill, I noticed that when you're at these functions, what you'll do is like, you'll grab someone, right? Someone will start talking to you, and you'll like grab someone else and be like, hey, have you met so and so? And then they'll start talking, and he'll just like disappear. You know what I mean? And I do the
Mm.
same thing. Like, that's my number one, like, at a mixer or whatever, that's my favorite thing to do. Be like, hey, YouTube's hot, so I don't have to and just like disappear for a little
Oh my
bit.
god.
Um, but like nonetheless, like I guess the point that I'm trying to get with telling this long-winded story is that like I had to learn, right? Like I
Mm,
learned over the first half of my career, because I had good mentors who
mm,
were patient with me and who taught me through by example and be like, hey, like and by when I say by example, just by inviting me to things, basically,
yeah.
just by inviting me to participate and to be myself and to learn how to
Mm,
be myself. And it's those experiences that I took into the tabletop role playing space, and that I didn't necessarily take into the comic space, to be honest, because that was still
oh,
early on in my career. So
yeah.
I was still like, you know, like not sure how to interact as much, not as sure how to build community. But by the time I
Mm,
got to the role playing space, I was like, okay, like I get it. I'm a little bit more mature when it comes to this stuff.
mm,
Like I understand like what it is, or
yeah.
how, like, how to be myself, right?
Yeah.
So I had that going for me. I had that experience. So
Mm,
I wasn't like a complete natural at it, not at all, right? Like
yeah.
it took me a long time to figure that stuff out.
Mm. No, that makes a ton of sense because like I mean I'm so glad you had that experience. What a cool thing to happen to have someone that is so open and willing to like share all of these resources to connect you with more folks and to kind of to back a bunch of Kickstarters. What a cool guy. That's such a cool story. I'm so like glad to hear about the kind of support that you've received during your career and how that's like translated to other parts of your connections with other people. It's so wonderful to hear. Um, we spoke about really briefly about the dangers of TikTok, and I guess kind of like that'd be a great transition into like chatting about the social media landscape and by virtue of that also the influencer landscape within like tabletop industry as well as for you as a publisher. So I kind of wanted to ask you about like from a publisher's perspective, what does engaging in the like current way that the social media landscape is functioning look like, and how does like engaging with the influencer scene within that look like, and like especially within like our really niche hobby, right? Like how are y'all like looking at that emerging sort of developments as things happen?
Yeah, it's interesting because like it's such a small scene that it seems like everybody knows one another.
Yeah, it does feel
Um,
that way.
so it is kind of like it's interesting. It is definitely like there is a sense of that. I really, I guess I would first kind of distinguish it into like there's kind of two broad but slightly related kind of
Mm,
industries at play here. There
mhm,
is the tabletop role playing like industry, like the publishers, people who are making the games,
mhm.
and then there's this actual play
Yeah.
industry that is adjacent and sometimes right on top of it, but not exactly the same thing. And what's really interesting is that both spaces are kind of feast and famine. In the tabletop role playing space, you have Dungeons and Dragons right at the top, taking up most of the oxygen in the room, and then after that you have like Pathfinder and you have like Chaosium, and everything is like a huge like Half-Life down in terms of popularity. Right? I don't even know if Pathfinder is a Half-Life down from Dungeons and Dragons. Probably like 1/3 or like 1/4 of the size, if that. Right. So and in the actual play scene, you have like, at the top you obviously have Critical Role and Dimension 20, and then you have a couple of, like the podcast, Adventure Zone and whatnot, that are doing pretty well for themselves, and then you have a bunch of like aspiring kind of creators, right? And I don't know like the exact details of the scene, but both of them are like it's such an interesting place because especially with the actual play stuff, it's so new, and clearly this is like there's something here, because clearly, like, Dimension 20 just sold out Madison Square Garden, which is amazing,
That's wild to think about. It's a bunch
right?
of people. Bunch of people in
So like,
Madison Square Garden watching folks roll dice. That's wild to me still right now.
yeah, and like there's like I think there's so much excitement and there's so much growth to come, but
Mm,
everyone is like thinking about like that growth, right? And is
mm,
excited about that potential, but like maybe like not quite there yet.
yeah.
um and you know, like in terms of like the influencers, it's like, okay, we have like a lot of people who it's I don't know how to put this succinctly. Like there are a lot of people operating within this ecosystem, but there's not
Mm,
a lot of money to go around. And
yeah.
I know because I'm one of the people who has given out the money, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of money to give out. And
Mhm.
I am like, you know, like Mythworks is fairly successful.
Mm,
We're not like the most successful. We don't have like, there's certainly a lot of companies that are way bigger than ours, with way more advertising pockets than us.
mm,
But we've been fortunate in the sense that we have a wider range of relationships and with influencers. And I
mm,
think, like, from my perspective as a publisher, I think that's the best way to do it. What I mean by that is, you know, you are a cast member on Transplaner, and we sponsor Transplaner
yes, you did.
for one of the seasons there, the Chaos Protocol.
Yeah.
We also did a sponsorship of My First Dungeon, and they had
Yes.
a playthrough of the Wild Sea, which was really really cool. So when we can,
Mm,
we as a publisher, we want to support this medium of actual play. But I
mm,
also understand like that's difficult because actual play, if you are trying to make everyone whole in this space, as in you're paying all of your cast and your crew, it is hard, right? It is hard
oh
because
yeah.
like
Oh
it
yeah.
is hard. It's hard. It's hard, and not impossible, but very very difficult. And like the
Mm,
amount that it takes to make people whole, like that is a very big ask of a company the size of mine,
yeah.
right? Sometimes even over a couple of episodes or whatever. But like we want to do it because we think it's important. We think this medium is growing, and we want to
Yeah.
support the arts. And we
Yes.
also, and obviously there's an incentive for us too, because we want people talking about our games and
Mm,
playing our games on stream so that they can show other people how cool the games are, and show people how to play the games.
yeah.
So there's a lot of alignment there. um, what I found is that like for our relationship with influencers, we want like a mix, right? Like
Mm,
we want to engage with everybody if we can, but we want to engage with them where they are at. So sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes
mhm.
a person with a huge following like Quinn's um, blesses you with a review that completely transforms your business, right? And it's just like, oh my goodness, like when he did the Wild Sea review, like that just completely transformed like the trajectory of where we were going, and we're so grateful for that. And that happened, you know, it happened out of the blue for the most part. He kind of cold reached out to Felix, and you know, he's like, hey, I'm launching this channel and I'm doing this. And then he also happened to be doing Slug Blaster as well. And I don't even know if he knew those were the same companies when we first started, to be honest. But then he also played CPRPNK, so like clearly like his taste aligned with my taste, or Mythworks taste. And then like we had another big review back in the day with Dave Thamavor on YouTube, and that before Quinn's was like the most exposure we had gotten. And the way that worked about basically was, you know, I reached out to Dave on Discord. I said I was a huge fan. I inquired about his like sponsorship rates. They were a little high at the time, and so I asked him if he had a physical copy of the Wild Sea, and he was like, no, I don't have a physical copy. And it was like, well, do you mind if I send you one? Like maybe like a review copy. And he was like, no, not at all. And I sent him a review copy, and he was enthusiastic about it, and you know, made some content for us as a result. And other creators, we've had similar relationships, and other creators have come up to us and written us and like, hey, I have this actual play, or I'm doing this thing, and like I would love to, you know, like be sponsored or to have like whatever. And you know, I'm like, okay, what do you need? What are you looking for? And they're like, just a couple of copies. And I'm like, okay, sure, we'll send over a couple copies for you, right? So we have relationships like that, and then we have relationships with like Transplaner and My First Dungeon, which are like, you know, much larger than that, right? Or actual sponsorships. And the way that we view those, both of those, as well, as like part of my evaluation is like, I think it's important that when you're having like an actual relationship like that,
Yeah.
not like a okay, I'm giving you exposure type of thing that like Quinn's was maybe doing for us, or
Mm,
sometime or that maybe we can grant like really small creators now and be like, hey,
mm,
yeah, you guys can have some books or whatever, right? When it's like an actual like sponsorship thing, it's like the most important thing is that like there's a match in terms of like size and ambition. I think are the biggest things,
yeah.
because ideally in those relationships you want a relationship where you both grow together,
Yeah.
where you both are like, we're both kind of at this level, and like because you're gonna put your all into it, and like we think you're gonna do that, and we're gonna match you like monetarily,
Mm,
like we do grow that way, right? And we grow our audiences together. I think
yeah.
that is like the ideal situation. And then like I think about that too, like, you know, they're like, I mean, it like if the opportunity came and like Dimension 20 was able to play Slug Blaster, right? Like, would I be
Mm,
able to put like a dollar amount on that? And it's hard. It's like, okay,
yeah.
like I think I think it would be better if it happened like naturally, if it happens at
Mm,
all, right? Like something like that.
absolutely.
Or like if we're able to pay, you know, somebody who is sort of used to that more like traditional like Dungeons and Dragons money, let's say, right? Like that
Yeah.
where they do have money, it's like that's tough for us. And it's like,
Mm,
will our audience kind of like, what is the value in that, right? Like
yeah.
so there are like so many factors, but I think
Yeah.
when it comes to working with influencers, like it's my philosophy is to have a mix, right? I don't want
Mm,
to like be known as the person who's just giving out sponsorships left and right, and then everybody's gonna be like, hey, you know,
we
you
do
get
not want to
your
be another honey. No. Like,
right.
no.
They're like hey, they're just writing out checks, but like we want to support small creators, we want to support
Mm,
larger creators, right? We want larger creators to support us. When we want to have like this ecosystem where it's like we kind of just have like a range of it, where it's like sometimes we're
mm,
sponsoring, sometimes we're giving out review copies, sometimes we're giving out books for charity,
yeah.
sometimes we're blessed to have a bigger creator like shut us out or just
Mm,
play our games, right? And I think that's like sort of maybe like karmically, where like, you know, if you like you
mhm.
help out the little guy from your perspective, hopefully like the big guy from your perspective will help you out and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? Like so that's what we're trying to do with that. And then in terms of like the overall thing, it's like if there is a kind of decision to be made, especially when it comes to marketing, when it comes to marketing tabletop role playing games, like the thing I
Mm,
always think about is this going to help more people play our
mm,
games? And
yeah.
that's what it comes down to, because it's like that is, you know, it's selling RPG books is good, but selling RPG books is not the same as having people play your game.
Yeah.
Okay? They're like distinct things. And like um if you want a game that lasts, if you like the games that transcend generations, right?
Mm,
Like the like Shadowrun always has a big ballroom
yeah.
in Gen Con every year, and so there's like Cyberpunk and you know, Pathfinder Society and
Mm,
you know, like all that stuff, right? And Magpie does a great job of this. They run so many freaking games, right?
yeah.
It's like if you want games that like really capture people, like if the success of an RPG is not determined like less in sales and more in how many people are playing the game.
Yeah.
Like if that's the main metric. Like okay,
Yeah.
and so kind of working backwards from there, like how do we get people to play this game?
Mm,
And that's where I think what I think about when I think of like sort of our marketing spend and working
mm.
with influencers and whatnot.
No, that's so eye-opening, and it's nice to hear about all of these, like where your attention is, and You're so right about like being able to get more folks to play the games is a different feeling and a different level of kind of like success and just I don't want to say the word engagement, but just being able to endure within the zeitgeist of the ever moving TTRPG space makes a ton of sense, and everything you said makes a ton of sense to me. So thank you for sharing. I know that was a big question, so I appreciate you sharing about that. I think this is a great point for us to kind of like transition to the next sort of like major heading here, which is about like crowdfunding and measuring success for MythWorks. We kind of touched quite a bit on crowdfunding and about how MythWorks has been in it from Kickstarter's beginning, it sounds like. And I wanted to ask you throughout, I mean, because you've been in the game for so long now, that I feel like this question is especially helpful to hear from you about. What does measuring engaging success look like in the in crowdfunding campaigns? Has it changed over the years from when you first started to now?
It's really interesting having that question because we currently have a much smaller campaign for our comic
Mm,
Sancha and Blanco up right now, and
mm,
that one is probably just going to fund their goal at $4,500,
mm,
and it's a much smaller project. But it's an important project for me creatively, personally,
mm,
and we are following that up with another smaller project for Zine Quest, our game Time Force, which we designed during the pandemic, and we're not sure how that one's going to do, but it's probably not going to be a huge campaign whatsoever.
mm,
And we have done campaigns that are big, big-ish, right? I think
mm,
our biggest was like 180,000. We haven't quite broken that 200K threshold yet, and we've done ones that are extremely small. Our first RPG project was a story game called Love Balloon, and we had 99 backers
mm,
and about $2,000, I think, and we barely
mm,
funded that one. What is success? That was our first foray. Love Balloon was our first foray into RPGs.
mm,
And I think it would have been very easy to quit at that point and be like, okay, this is obviously not for us, or we're not. This is not our scene, and we should quit while we're not quite ahead. Even we should quit while we're
mhm,
behind, right? But we didn't, and we persisted, and we just kept on believing, not just in the big projects, but like the small projects especially.
mm,
And I think that there's two conflicting things here.
mm,
There's me as a business person, as a
mhm,
business owner, entrepreneur, and then there's me as an artist.
mm,
And I think that I've always been an artist first.
mm.
I didn't go to business school. I went to film school.
Yeah.
I decided at a young age that I wanted to be an artist. Maybe an
Mm,
artist with like an artist producer, which is kind of like a business person, like someone who actually makes things and learns how to make things,
mm,
and gets the wheels of making things done. But I wanted to be an artist first. And Vince is the same way, and that's always been important to us. It's always been important that
mm,
sometimes you just got to make art for the sake of making art. And like I said with the other stuff, it's like, you're putting the energy out there. Maybe the energy doesn't necessarily return in the form of currency, lots of currency, but
mm.
it satisfies your soul in other ways. It is
Yeah.
a creation that you've made because you believe in it and you think it's important, and it's important to you. It's important to the world because you say
Mm,
it's important, and
yeah.
that, was a certain extent, is all that should matter.
Mm,
Now, obviously, there are real life concerns like, you gotta eat, you gotta put a roof over your head,
yeah.
especially if you make this a profession, right? I have a team now that I need to pay regularly. I have royalties that I need to dish out, right? That I have artists who depend on selling their books in order to make a livelihood. And all that weighs very heavily on my mind. Like, not gonna lie, right? Like, more money, more problems to a certain extent, like more responsibilities, definitely more responsibilities. um and that can be a lot. But like, I don't want us to ever lose sight of why we're doing this in the first place. And why we're doing it is because we love the things that we make. We love the art, right? It's important for us to make a project like Sancha and Blanco, which is about like my dog as the villain and the two dogs that were my neighbors who were shut in the backyard for a long time. It's important to create a game like the Love Balloon, which is really like
Mm,
which really like reignited Vince and I's passion for each other creatively, right? It's like our
mm,
love letter to each other, because that's a time when during like writing we were very rocky in terms of writing scripts, but we turned to games and we're able to collaborate through games, right? So it's like
mm,
kind of symbolic of that like new phase in our relationship. It's important to get a game like Time Force out, because that represents like us committing to ourselves and our
mm,
games and our works, and not just like that those of others, right? And saying like, hey, we're gonna make this a priority, and we're gonna give this our best foot forward, even even if it's a smaller project. Now that being said, it's like we kind of have to do the thing where actors sometimes do, where they say like, one for me, one for you, right? Where it's like, okay, like maybe this one I'm gonna do the artsy indie film, or the smaller project, and then I'm gonna go do a thing that I think is gonna be a bigger hit, that is maybe gonna secure our fortunes a little bit more. And there is some level of pragmatism that goes into that, and thinking about our projects. But yeah, it's important for us to advocate for ourselves, to advocate for the art that we want to see, that we want to bring forth into the world. And I think that goes for everyone. And I think if you're listening to this and you're an aspiring RPG designer, um, I want you to really think about like what you're doing it for. Like, why are you making this thing? Like, why is it important for you to make this? Why is it important for this thing to exist in this world? And I can almost guarantee that anybody listening to it and answering that question critically, it's not going to be because you want to be rich. Right? Like, you would not be doing this if that were the case, right? So, find the reason, be honest with yourself, and find the reason why you're really doing it. Now, I've had the fortune in my career to both have created things that have been successful, as well as published things that have been successful, right off the bat. So I do have that privilege, right? Like, my career has been blessed in that sense, where I did my first project and like was able to build off of that, and like I recognize that privilege. But I've also been on the other end of things, where I've had projects that have nearly not succeeded, despite putting my like heart and effort into it. And um, I can say unequivocally that some like when it is a struggle, sometimes that's when it means the most. And that those are the projects, like it warms my heart. And anytime someone buys Love Balloon or plays Love Balloon, I'm like, oh, thank you so much, right? Like that means so much to me personally. Same thing with Sancha and Blanco. When somebody tells me they love that story, that means so much to me personally. So I don't have like a good answer for it. As far as like crowdfunding as a whole, I'll be brief too. Like, crowdfunding is in an interesting place. When crowdfunding first started about 15 years ago, there was a level of trust in crowdfunding, even though that trust was completely unfounded. It was because that the idea of crowdfunding was new and exciting, and people were willing to take risks on new and exciting things. They were excited to be helping new creators bring their art into the world. That has changed somewhat. That has changed quite a bit, actually, if I'm being honest. Now,
yeah.
because crowdfunding is no longer new and exciting, the expectation, not only are people less willing to give a chance to new creators in general, they still are. Don't get me wrong, they still are, but just not as much to the extent that they were before. And not only that, but the expectations have grown. The expectations about professionalism, about like having your shit together, all of that stuff has grown. So it's like this interesting kind of dichotomy that's happening, where like it's almost the reverse of when it first started. And in addition to that, the amount crowdfunding, what made crowdfunding very powerful in the beginning was that there was only one platform, and that platform had a lot of trust on it, right? Like, even if projects went down individually, people viewed Kickstarter as, for the most part, a force for, I don't know if good is too strong of a word, but for creativity, let's say, right? And maybe that has waned a little bit. And now we have all these different platforms. And I don't know if all of these different platforms long term are really good for the space. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it definitely means that the audience is more fractured. And I think what that does is it benefits people with an established audience more than people who are trying to build an audience. And that makes me really sad. As someone who was able to build an audience through Kickstarter, that makes me sad that those opportunities are less than they used to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was, you kind of answered my next question about like hearing your thoughts on the what feels like the current crowdfunding model within TTRPG publishing. It seems to be almost like the expectation now as a TTRPG publisher or anyone that's trying to like build or publish their games, to do it within a crowdfunding model and things like that. So hearing your thoughts on how the metric has changed and transformed, and the kind of like external pressures of how to be perceived and how to present your product to potential backers, feels it feels correct. It feels accurate to what I felt like I've been perceiving within the crowdfunding model. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. As we kind of like wrap up, I do kind of have like a final question for you, and it's about kind of like not necessarily on crowdfunding success, but about success for Mythworks. What does success look like to you, and what are your big hopes, big dreams for Mythworks, as we begin wrapping up for Dicey Banter?
Ooh, okay. Big question.
Yeah,
I want Mythworks to be a company, a brand that every geek recognizes. I want it to be
love
like
that.
ubiquitous, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I want it, like you go to a convention and people are rocking like Mythworks merch or whatever, and they know
Yeah.
like or they mention it in the same breath as like I don't know, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse or whatnot, right?
Mm,
Or like that kind of level. So um that's like I think where we want to take the company.
mm.
We want to eventually make it to the silver screen. That's always been the goal. We still want to make movies and TV shows and cartoons and all these things, and we've never been shy about that ambition. So eventually that's what we want to do. That's like kind of where we're driving towards, hopefully.
Mm,
And then like I want to just take care of my people. I want to take care of my
mm,
community. I want to take care of the people who ride or die with us, and be able to take care of our employees, my business partner. He's starting a family, stuff like that.
mm,
Our creators, and just be able to provide for everyone. That's sort of what motivates me to keep
mm.
going as well.
I love that, and what a beautiful way to end the banter. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining me and for being a guest on Dicey Bear. Please let the folks know at home where they can find you and any particular projects or things you'd like them to keep an eye out for in the future from MythWorks.
Yes, yes. You can find all of our stuff at myth.works. On socials, we are at MythWorks HQ. We're on Blue Sky, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. And look out for Time Force coming to a zine month near you. That's our next project. It should be launching sometime in February. It is a hop, skip, and trip through time. It's fun. It's a very collaborative game, uses a D6 dice pool system, and when you suffer a failure, you desync and you describe how you have desynced from the timeline and somehow changed. And same thing with when you come back to the current timeline, there's some prompts, some simple prompts that help you manifest the change in the timeline that you see. It's a really great game. It's one of our best, I think, and it is coming soon.
I can't believe that we went this whole time and we talked very little about Type Force. That's cool as fuck, Ray. That is so cool. Um, that is so delicious. Please check that out. By the time this episode airs, hopefully the project will be live, and I'll have the links in chat, folks. Thank you so much once again, Ray, for being a guest over on Dicey Banter. And as we are wrapping up, hello, folks. Thank you so much for being here and for watching Dicey Banter. I'm Valiant Doran. I am Valiant Doran, and I've been your host here on Dicey Banter. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Doran or also SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure hunt I just set you on. And if you want to keep up to date with all the stuff that I'm doing, Transplaner is happening on Saturdays. We talked about Transplaner a bit. Where our Chaos Protocol is live on Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, over on twitch.tv/TransplanerRPG. And if you're enjoying Dicey Banter, consider pledging to our Patreon. All of the funds go directly into production again. You can see works in progress behind the scenes, as well as early access to episodes before they go live. And with that, we're going to be rating somebody amazing, no doubt. So please hang on, don't touch the dial, and we'll be rating someone awesome. And thank you so much for being here. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.